Hello everyone! Today we're going to be taking a look at a very popular horror comedy horror musical, the 1986 film adaptation of Little Shop of Horrors, which was directed by Frank Oz and features music and lyrics by Alan Menken and Howard Ashman and the acting and singing talents of Rick Moranis, Ellen Greene, and Levi Stubbs. Rick Moranis stars as Seymour Krelborn, a poor slob who drudges all day in Mr. Mushnick's flower shop and pines for his coworker Audrey, who's dating a dentist. Business is practically non-existent until the exotic plant Seymour came across one day after a solar eclipse, which he's named Audrey 2, suddenly starts drawing a crowd and things take off. Seymour's life turns around, his boss is finally being nice to him, and he might have a chance to win Audrey's heart. But what the plant thrives on is blood, something that Seymour has in limited supply. If he doesn't want to lose everything he's gained, he's got to find a way to keep up with the plant's voracious appetite and increasingly gruesome demands. Here's a movie I saw 10, 15 years ago that I didn't actually like that much the first time around. I don't remember now what it was I objected to, if there was even anything specific that I didn't like, or I just wasn't feeling the whole thing. But I can tell you that in the years since, I've become a lot more familiar with the music. This is one of those musicals that if I'm in the mood to listen to a musical, I am very likely to put on, and I've gained much more appreciation for the film's creativity, its camera work, its costumes and performances, everything. It's based on 1960s quirky, low-budget black comedy The Little Shop of Horrors, directed by Roger Corman, who co-wrote the story with Charles B. Griffith. That film has its own interesting production history, which I won't go into here. In 1982, a musical version premiered off-Broadway, directed by Howard Ashman, with book and lyrics by Ashman and music by his frequent collaborator Alan Menken. This production ran for 5 years, with plans for a Broadway premiere canceled in favor of retaining the more intimate feel of an off-Broadway show. It did eventually get a Broadway debut in 2003. Thanks to the off-Broadway show's success, the film adaptation was given the green light, and so they made this movie. Of course, there are differences between the original Roger Corman film and the stage show, and between the stage show and the musical film adaptation, but aside from a few cut numbers and some little tweaking here and there, and one added number, and a different ending for the theatrical release, which we'll get to in a bit, it sticks pretty close to the original show, at least as far as I know. I've never gotten to see the show live. My favorite thing about Little Shop of Horrors is the music. Its roots are in 50s, 60s doo-wop and rock and roll, and if you like that era and genre of music, as I do, that makes it all the more fun. There's a kind of Greek chorus that stands on the sidelines throughout, played by Tashina Arnold, Michelle Weeks, and Tisha Campbell. This trio comments on events and occasionally interacts with the characters, and what I think is the coolest thing, their names, Crystal, Ronette, and Chiffon, are taken from 3 prominent girl groups of the early 60s. The Crystals, who did Then He Kissed Me, He's a Rebel, Da Do Ron Ron, the Ronettes, who are famous for Be My Baby, and the Chiffons, who did One Fine Day, He's So Fine, and Sweet Talking Guy. Their harmonics, choreography, and many costume changes are inspired by these girl groups as well. And during Dentist, there's a part where they say, "He's a dentist and he'll never ever be any good," which is a direct parody of the chorus from He's a Rebel. There's also a line that calls him the leader of the plaque, a twist on the leader of the pack, another I'm in love with a bad boy on a motorcycle song from the early 60s, but that was recorded by the Shangri-Las. In general, the music is deceptively upbeat, with a persistent driving rhythm. I consider Now It's Just the Gas to be the heaviest number in the show because of how it ends, but they cut that song from the movie, so there's really only one somber song, Somewhere That's Green, and that's more wistful than depressing. Even the introductory Skid Row Downtown, which features the leads and the ensemble lamenting the dead-end state of their existence, has a catchy energy in spite of the desperation of the lyrics. And as a side note, that opening scene features some great soloists. You might not pick up on it just casually watching the movie, but if you go back and listen with headphones, you really can hear how strong the individual vocals are. What's funny is that clearly this story is dealing with dark material and melancholy characters who find themselves in unhappy predicaments, yet it still manages to feel positive. Even the villain songs, and there are 4 of those, are upbeat, with clever and hilarious lyrics. I consider this a particularly well-cast movie musical. Rick Moranis, who was in a ton of comedies in the 80s and early 90s, is ideal as the klutzy orphan who spent his life getting kicked around by everybody, and then starts getting kicked around by his plant. Rick Moranis is a class act, by the way. I have a soft spot for him because of his decision to just stop making movies so he could stay home and raise his 2 young children after his wife died. I have so much respect for him for putting his family first like that. I don't think of him as a singer, but he does a fine job here, and I gotta give credit to anyone who's not known for singing who takes on the lead role in a musical and then nails it. I would say that the story of Little Shop of Horrors is like a cross between The Day of the Triffids by John Wyndham, excellent apocalyptic novel from the 1950s, and Faust. Yes, I just so happen to have talked about Faust somewhat extensively in my previous video. Faust is an old story, Germanic in origin. Christopher Marlowe wrote an English-language drama, Dr. Faustus, in the 1500s, and Goethe published his famous German play in the early 1800s. Variations on the Faust tragedy have since been produced in many mediums, and key elements have been referenced in hundreds of books and films. The most prominent of these is the Faustian bargain, wherein the main character is tempted into making an agreement with the devil, his soul in exchange for the gratification of his desires. That's what's going on here. Seymour is a luckless, woebegone Faust in love with his co-worker, and Audrey too is a botanical Mephistopheles, offering fame, fortune, and love in exchange for Seymour's soul-crushing commitment to supply bodies that Audrey too will devour. Seymour does have a firm sense of right and wrong, and in general he's a sweet, wholesome little guy. He just gets twisted around a bit. Audrey too hones in on his adoration and takes advantage of his chivalrous feelings for Audrey, pouncing on a moment of vulnerability to get Seymour to do what he wants. Whether or not Seymour becomes greedy and should face punishment for his crimes, well, that's an interesting discussion. Ellen Greene had already played Audrey for years off-Broadway, so while they floated a couple other possibilities out there, there wasn't really anyone else they could imagine casting. Audrey is a character of contradictions. She's sweet-tempered and optimistic and encouraging, even though she comes from an awful background and is stuck in an abusive relationship, the implications of which are alarming. She wears these exaggerated tight clothes and low-cut tops and has had to do some degrading things, but is the purest character in the story, and at home and in her dreams everything is juvenile or conservative, suggesting that how she dresses is the product of necessity or everyone else's expectations of her rather than what she wants. Audrey also speaks and sings in this unusual, tiny, wispy, almost babyish voice, and then a crescendo comes and Ellen Greene lets loose this huge, passionate belt, and it's like, whoa, I didn't know you had it in you! What she desires more than anything is a picture-perfect life with Seymour that's about as far away from her reality as you can get. And as comical as her fantasy may seem, peppered as it is with brand names and images straight out of a magazine, it's that tireless and wistful idealism that makes her so endearing. The blossoming romance is the wholesome heart of Little Shop of Horrors, the simple charm of a love story between 2 unlikely people standing in sharp contrast to the horror of the grisly killings, mostly implied, and the foul-mouthed, bloodthirsty plant. Levi Stubbs provides the awesome voice of Audrey II. Stubbs was lead vocalist of the Four Tops, one of the best-selling Motown groups of the 60s and 70s, with hits that include Reach Out, I'll Be There, I Can't Help Myself, or Sugar Pie Honey Bunch, Ain't No Woman Like the One I've Got, Standing in the Shadows of Love, and Baby I Need Your Lovin'. Audrey II is a really fun, cunning villain, possibly one of the best villains in musical theater. It's freaky how clever and how aware this plant is. It doesn't have eyes, but it knows exactly what's going on and how to manipulate a situation or a person to its own advantage, whether that calls for using honeyed words or getting nasty. The cast also features Vincent Gardenia as Mr. Mushnick, who isn't as much of a jerk as I would have expected. Yes, he isn't nice to Seymour, but he isn't that mean. He does try to get Audrey to break up with her boyfriend multiple times, and I just don't feel that he is truly deserving of his ultimate fate. That said, I don't feel too bad when he meets his demise in supper time, especially because it's such a good scene, beautifully shot and lit and choreographed, in addition to being comically sinister. Steve Martin plays the other significant supporting role of Orin Scrivello DDS. He's doing a hilariously over-the-top Elvis parody, if Elvis were also a biker and a sadistic dentist. One of the film's most famous, or infamous, scenes is the one where Bill Murray makes a cameo as a masochist who gets his jollies going to the dentist. This scene took place in the Corman film, with a very young Jack Nicholson playing the masochist. It was cut from the stage show, but then reintroduced for the film version. It's a total non sequitur. Murray's character appears just in that one scene, there's no music, and it has nothing to do with advancing the plot, but it's one of the most well-known scenes, which you'll either find really funny or really uncomfortable. There are a few other comedian cameos. John Candy makes an appearance as a wacky radio show host who interviews Seymour. Christopher Guest pops in the shop, credited as the first customer. And Jim Belushi shows up to make Seymour a final tempting offer. His role is played by Paul Dooley in the director's cut. Before I forget, I'd also like to throw in a mention of the gag reel. There's some really good stuff in there, and it shows, first, what a complicated shoot this was, and second, how much fun the cast and crew had making this movie. Like I said, I really enjoy this music. I like listening to both the original cast album and the soundtrack album, which does have some little differences here and there, a few changed lyrics to throw me off when I'm trying to sing along. I've talked about how much I enjoy Suddenly Seymour, not just the song, but the entire scene in another video, and I do occasionally sing Grow For Me while tending our plants. I don't know that it does them any good, but, well, they haven't grown into talking, people-eating monsters, so I don't think it's doing any harm. In the film, I most missed the longer version of The Meek Shall Inherit. There was a whole dream sequence that they ended up cutting, and I missed Don't Feed the Plants, which they had to cut when they changed the film's ending for the theatrical release. And I'm going to talk about the ending now, so here's a spoiler warning. Originally, the film's ending was supposed to be the same as it is on stage, with Audrey II eating the main characters, growing to massive proportions, multiplying, and taking over the world. But test audiences didn't react well to this ending. That's an understatement. They hated it. Frank Oz relates that that's how he learned that there's a difference between killing characters in live theater, where they're going to come out a few minutes later for the curtain call and a big round of applause, and killing characters in a movie where that's it. So an alternative was whipped up where Seymour defeats the plant and he and Audrey get a happily ever after, although there is still a cheeky hint that Audrey II hasn't been completely vanquished. There are also minor cuts and edits in other places to tone down Seymour's compliance, his murderous activities on Audrey II's behalf. Having to can the first ending material was a huge disappointment for the filmmakers, who had put in a ton of effort and spent $5 million to create these elaborate apocalyptic sequences with giant Audrey II's demolishing the city, evilly laughing all the way. In 1998, low-quality black and white footage of the original ending was accidentally released to the public on the special edition DVD. As soon as producer David Geffen found out that this subpar footage had gone out there, the DVDs were recalled and reissued without it. It wasn't until 2012 that a restored version of the footage in color was released as part of the new special edition DVD and Blu-ray referred to as the director's cut. It's a sign of the times, I guess, that the majority of contemporary audiences love this significantly darker ending, and many consider it the superior finale. Which ending do I prefer? Well, I do find what happens with Audrey in the director's cut pretty grim, and I like to see characters that I've gotten attached to get a happy ending if they deserve it, and that is a key phrase here. Does Seymour deserve a happy ending? Should he get away with what he did? It's questionable. Regardless of that, I think the original ending packs way more of a punch. Don't Feed the Plants is a great number. I enjoy movies where giant monsters, preferably but not exclusively extraterrestrials, go on city-destroying rampages, and the gimmick with Audrey 2 bursting through the screen is a great final shot. Fortunately, the one entirely original song that was added to the film, Mean Green Mother from Outer Space, appears in the finale no matter which version you watch, and that is one of Little Shop of Horror's most bombastic moments. It garnered one of the film's 2 Academy Award nominations, and Audrey 2 is an impressive beast, but I think the singing pods are what really puts the number over the edge. Audrey 2, both on stage and in the film, really is the star of the show. The more massive it grows, the more menacing and malicious it becomes, and the more it demands your attention. On stage, they came up with all kinds of creative ways to bring the plant to life, like giving Seymour a dummy arm so that his real arm can be manipulating the plant, the smaller version of the plant obviously, and building a pot big enough that a puppeteer can hide inside and manipulate the Venus flytrap mouth in sync with the voice actor just off stage. Naturally, the film version didn't have to contend with some of those issues. You don't have to work so hard to hide things from the audience when you can just make judicious use of your camera and editing and all that. But the film has very few special effects. A large team of puppeteers is operating Audrey 2 and its vines and its pods, hence why Frank Oz, with his extensive background in puppeteering on The Muppet Show, Sesame Street, etc., was a perfect choice to direct. There were multiple plants constructed and multiple shops built on different scales to assist with the illusion of Audrey 2's growth. The puppetry effects are excellent, and they managed to make the lip movement so smooth and convincing by slowing the frame rate at which they filmed, then playing the footage at a faster speed. This required any actors in the same shot to act and lip sync in slow motion. The movie was filmed over the course of several months on the sound stages at Pinewood Studios, and I think you can tell there wasn't really a huge attempt to camouflage this, which I think makes it look like a stage play motion picture hybrid. There's not a whole lot of space between songs, and the segues from one scene or musical number to another are quite fluid. I like how certain characters will be in frame, and then the camera pans to an adjacent section of the set, and there's another character over there. Transitions like this promote a sense of constant movement and energy, while subtly stressing the importance of paying attention to what's going on in both the background and the foreground of a shot. Now, I get a kick out of this movie, but I do realize that it's not for everyone. Some may find it too dark or too gruesome, others may think it too corny. On the flip side, though, I do think it's one of those movies that some people are fans of who don't typically like musicals. Speaking for myself, I really enjoy it. And I hope you enjoyed this review of it. Let me know what you think of this movie if you have seen it in the comments below. Love to hear what you have to say, and I'll be back next week with another video. Thanks for watching.